Marcus violently zipped up his heavy leather duffel bag, his hands shaking with 20 years of unimaginable betrayal. On the pristine kitchen island between him and his weeping wife Elena sat a crumpled piece of paper, a simple, fun-at-home DNA test that had just completely shattered their perfect family. 20 years. Elena. Marcus roared, his voice cracking as he slammed his fist on the counter, pointing at the genetic results proving their college-age daughter wasn't biologically his. You looked me in the eyes and lied to my face for 2 decades. Elena dropped to her knees on the hardwood floor, tears of desperate panic streaming down her face as she reached out for him. She didn't try to deny the test results, but she frantically begged him to stay and listen. But Marcus was already turning his back, entirely convinced his wife was a manipulative cheater. He was walking out the door to abandon his family forever, having absolutely no idea that Elena had never been unfaithful and the terrifying, heartbreaking truth she was hiding about the day their daughter was born was about to completely destroy his understanding of what it actually means to be a father. Welcome back to Moments and Meanings. Before we uncover the devastating twist in today's story, take a quick moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below, do you believe that being a parent is strictly about biology, or is it about the love and sacrifice you give every single day? In a world obsessed with bloodlines and genetics, it is incredibly easy to forget that families are built on a foundation of choices, not just Today, we are diving into a deeply emotional story about a devoted husband who accidentally uncovers a life-shattering secret through a seemingly innocent ancestry test. But the heartbreaking reason his wife kept this massive secret buried for 20 years will completely change how you view love, loyalty, and the true definition of a family. Let's begin. For 20 years, Marcus believed he was the luckiest man on the face of the earth. His life in their quiet, upscale suburban neighborhood was the picture of absolute, undeniable perfection. He had a successful career as an architect, a beautiful, loving wife named Elena, and above all else, his absolute pride and joy, his 20-year-old daughter, Maya. Marcus and Maya shared a bond that most parents only ever dreamed of. From the moment she was born, Marcus was entirely devoted to her. He was the dad who never missed a single soccer game. The dad who spent hours sitting on the floor teaching her how to build intricate model airplanes. And the dad who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her practice for her college entrance exams. They had the exact same sarcastic sense of humor, they both aggressively hated tomatoes, and they even shared the same distinctive, crooked smile when they laughed. To Marcus, Maya was his absolute entire world. There was nothing he wouldn't do to protect her. It was a crisp Friday evening, and Maya was home for the weekend from her sophomore year of college. The warm, sprawling kitchen smelled of roasted garlic and fresh basil. Marcus was standing at the stove, playfully tossing a wooden spoon in the air while Maya sat at the kitchen island, laughing hysterically at one of his terrible dad jokes. Elena was standing near the sink, quietly drying a porcelain plate, smiling softly as she watched her husband and daughter interact. It was a scene of perfect, domestic bliss. Okay, hold on, Maya laughed, digging into her heavy canvas backpack sitting next to her on the stool. I actually got you a present, Dad. All the kids in my dorm have been doing these, and I thought it would be incredibly fun for us to do together. Maya pulled out a brightly colored, glossy rectangular box and slammed it playfully onto the pristine marble countertop. Printed in bold, modern letters across the front of the box were the words, Global Ancestry and Health. Discover your DNA. A spit test? Marcus chuckled, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel as he walked over to the island. He picked up the box, thoroughly amused. Maya, I already know where we're from. We're a boring mix of German and English. We're about as exotic as a loaf of white bread. That's what you think. Maya protested with a massive smile, ripping the plastic wrap off a second box she had bought for herself. My roommate took one and found out she's secretly 10% royalty from some tiny European country. Come on, Dad. It'll be a fun bonding activity. We can compare our genetic traits. All right, Marcus laughed, entirely humoring his beloved daughter. He opened the cardboard box and pulled out the small, sterile plastic swab tube. If I find out I'm related to a pirate, I am absolutely demanding to be called Captain from now on. Across the kitchen, the sudden, sharp sound of shattering porcelain pierced the warm atmosphere. Marcus and Maya both jumped, whipping their heads toward the sink. Elena had dropped the heavy dinner plate she was drying. It was completely smashed into a dozen sharp, jagged pieces on the hardwood floor. But Elena wasn't looking at the broken mess at her feet. She was staring directly at the bright, glossy dinner box on the kitchen island. Her skin had violently drained of all color, turning as pale as a ghost. Her hands were gripping the edge of the stainless steel sink so tightly that her knuckles were entirely white. A look of sheer, unadulterated terror completely consumed her eyes. "Elena? Honey, are you okay?" Marcus asked, immediately setting the swab down and taking a step toward his wife. Elena violently flinched, blinking rapidly as if she had just been snapped out of a horrible trance. I'm fine," she stammered, her voice breathless and trembling. "It just slipped. So clumsy of me. I'll clean it up." She immediately dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the sharp porcelain shards with her bare hands, completely ignoring the fact that her fingers were shaking violently. "Mom, let me help you," Maya said, getting up from the stool. "No." Elena snapped sharply, her voice unnaturally loud and aggressive. Marcus froze in his tracks, incredibly confused by his wife's sudden, highly intense reaction. Elena never raised her voice. Elena took a deep, shaky breath, desperately trying to pull her flawless, composed facade back together. "I'm sorry," she whispered, keeping her eyes glued to the floor. "I just don't want you to cut your hands. Just go back to your game." Marcus stared at his wife for a long, uneasy moment. A tiny, inexplicable knot of anxiety formed in the pit of his stomach, but he quickly brushed it off. Elena was probably just stressed from work. "All right," Marcus said gently. He turned back to the kitchen island, picked up the plastic swab, and playfully scraped the inside of his cheek, while Maya did the same. From the floor, Elena watched her husband seal his genetic material into the prepaid return envelope. Her heart pounded so violently against her ribs that she felt physically sick. As Marcus playfully dropped the sealed envelope into the outgoing mail basket, Elena closed her eyes in profound, agonizing despair. The 20-year-old ticking time bomb had just been officially armed, and Elena knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that within a matter of weeks, her entire perfect life was going to explode into a million irreversible pieces. Exactly 6 agonizing weeks had passed since the innocent Friday night in the kitchen. Maya was back at her university campus, completely unaware of the ticking time bomb rapidly counting down in her childhood home. Marcus was sitting alone in his quiet, sunlit home office on a Saturday morning, sipping a mug of dark roast coffee. His laptop chimed softly with a new email notification. "Global Ancestry. Your genetic results are finally ready." Marcus smiled, entirely expecting a boring, standard breakdown of his European heritage. He clicked the bright blue link, navigated through the colorful pie charts showing his English and German ancestry, and chuckled. He was exactly as boring as he had predicted. Then he clicked the tab labeled Close Family Matches. He expected to see Maya's profile sitting right at the very top, proudly displaying a 50% genetic match. Instead, his screen was completely, terrifyingly blank. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. He manually typed Maya's username into the genetic comparison tool, assuming there was just a glitch in the server. The screen loaded for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, a stark, bold red warning box popped up on the screen. Paternity match failed. Shared DNA, 0.00%. No biological relationship detected. Marcus physically stopped breathing. The mug of hot coffee slipped from his trembling hand, violently shattering across the hardwood floor of his office, mirroring the absolute destruction of his entire reality. "No," Marcus whispered, a cold, suffocating sweat breaking out across his forehead. "No, this is a mistake. This is a stupid, cheap internet scam." He frantically clicked the screen again, downloading the raw genetic data and running the paternity sequence 3 more times. Every single time, the bold red letters screamed the exact same devastating truth into his face. Maya, the beautiful, brilliant girl he had raised, protected, and loved with every single ounce of his soul for 2 decades, did not share a single drop of his blood. A massive, blinding wave of absolute, unfiltered rage violently slammed into Marcus's chest. The math was incredibly simple, and the conclusion was utterly horrific. 21 years ago, his perfect, loving wife had slept with another man, gotten pregnant, and silently forced Marcus to raise a child that wasn't his. Marcus aggressively slammed his laptop shut, grabbed the printed results, and marched down the hallway. He found Elena in the kitchen, folding laundry on the pristine kitchen island. Marcus didn't speak. He walked directly up to the island and violently slammed the crumpled genetic printout onto the marble countertop. Elena looked down at the bold red letters. Her breath hitched, her eyes widening in sheer, unadulterated terror. The secret she had buried in the darkest depths of her soul for 20 years had finally violently clawed its way into the light. 20 years, Elena, Marcus roared, his voice cracking with unimaginable agony as he pointed at the paper. You looked me in the eyes and lied to my face for 2 decades. Who is he? Who is her real father? Elena dropped to her knees on the hardwood floor, tears of desperate panic streaming down her face. She reached her trembling hands out, desperately trying to grab his pant leg. Marcus, please. It is not what you think. Elena wailed, her voice cracking hysterically. I never cheated on you. I swear on my life, I never touched another man. You have to listen to me. Don't you dare lie to me again. Marcus snarled, completely blinded by the devastating betrayal. The Dina doesn't lie, Elena. Maya isn't mine. Marcus turned his back on his weeping wife and marched straight into their master bedroom. He grabbed his heavy leather duffel bag from the closet and began violently throwing his clothes into it. He was entirely convinced that his marriage was a horrific 20-year illusion. Marcus, stop. Elena begged, crawling to the doorway of the bedroom, her face entirely ruined by tears. If you walk out that door, you are going to destroy our family over a lie. Let me tell you the truth about the hospital. Please. Marcus violently zipped up the heavy leather duffel bag, completely ignoring her pleas. The man who had spent 20 years being the perfect father walked out the front door, entirely abandoning his family, having absolutely no idea that the truth about the hospital was infinitely more terrifying and profoundly heartbreaking than an affair. For 3 excruciating days, Marcus sat completely alone in the dim, suffocating silence of a cheap roadside motel room. The heavy leather duffel bag remained entirely unpacked on the floor. The only light in the room came from the glowing screen of his laptop, which was covered in dozens of old digital photo albums. Marcus sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at a picture of him and a 7-year-old Maya covered in flour, laughing hysterically in their kitchen while baking cookies. A profound, agonizing grief physically crushed his chest. Every single memory he had of the last 20 years felt like a horrific, meticulously crafted lie. He had spent the last 72 hours entirely ignoring the frantic, back-to-back calls from Elena. He had blocked her number, entirely convinced that anything she had to say would just be another manipulative excuse to cover up her affair. But the silence was rapidly driving him insane. Suddenly, his cell phone vibrated violently against the cheap wooden nightstand. Marcus glanced at the screen, fully expecting to see another blocked notification, but his heart completely stopped. The caller ID didn't say Elena. It said, Maya. Marcus's breath hitched in his throat. His thumb hovered over the red decline button, trembling violently. He was entirely convinced he couldn't speak to her. If he heard her voice, he would shatter completely. He was the victim of a massive 20-year betrayal, and speaking to the living. Breathing proof of his wife's infidelity was something he simply couldn't handle. But as the phone continued to vibrate, a deep, undeniable, and unconditional fatherly instinct violently overpowered his toxic pride. Biology, or not, that was his little girl calling. He slowly swiped the green button and brought the phone to his ear. Hey, Dad. Maya's bright, cheerful voice echoed through the speaker, completely oblivious to the massive nuclear explosion that had just decimated her family. I know you're probably at the office, but I just aced my incredibly difficult chemistry midterm. I used that flashcard trick you taught me. I seriously couldn't have done it without you. Hearing the absolute, unfiltered love and gratitude in her voice struck Marcus like a physical blow to the stomach. Dad? Maya asked, her tone shifting slightly with genuine concern. Are you there? You sound weird. Are you okay? Tears of pure, devastating agony welled up in Marcus's eyes, spilling over his cheeks and dropping onto his wrinkled shirt. He tightly covered his mouth with his hand, desperately suppressing a heavy sob so she wouldn't hear him breaking down. I'm here, sweetie, Marcus choked out, his voice a pathetic, trembling whisper. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I always am. Thanks, Dad, Maya beamed. I love you. Tell Mom I'll call her tonight. The line clicked dead. Marcus dropped the phone onto the motel bed and completely broke down, crying hysterically into his hands. In that single, fleeting phone call, a massive, life-altering realization violently slammed into his brain. It didn't matter that they didn't share a single drop of DNA. It didn't matter that the genetic test said they were absolute strangers. Maya was his daughter. He had taught her how to walk. He had kissed her scraped knees. He had wiped away her tears. And he had spent 2 decades loving her with every single ounce of his soul. That profound, unshakable bond couldn't be erased by a drop of spit in a plastic tube. But that realization also brought a new, terrifying clarity. If Marcus still loved Maya with his entire being, then he absolutely owed it to himself, and to her, to find out exactly who her real father was. Elena had begged him to let her explain the truth about the hospital before he walked out. At the time, he thought it was just a pathetic excuse. Now, sitting in the suffocating motel room, an eerie, terrifying suspicion began to creep into his mind. Marcus violently grabbed his keys off the nightstand. He was done running. He was going to march straight back into that house, look his wife directly in the eyes, and demand the absolute, unfiltered truth, no matter how devastating it was. But as Marcus sped out of the motel parking lot, he had absolutely no idea that the secret he was about to violently force out of his wife would completely break him in a way an affair never could. The heavy front door of their suburban home creaked open, echoing through the suffocating, pitch-black silence of the hallway. Marcus stepped inside, his chest heaving with a mixture of dread and desperate resolve. He found Elena sitting on the floor of the dark living room, surrounded by old photo albums. She looked completely hollowed out, a ghost of the vibrant woman she had been just 3 days ago. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she was physically trembling as she clutched a small, faded metal lockbox to her chest. Marcus didn't yell this time. He slowly walked into the living room and stood over her, his voice heavy with a profound, terrifying exhaustion. I didn't answer your calls because I was entirely convinced you were lying to me, Marcus said quietly, the raw emotion bleeding through his words. But Maya called me today. And I realized that no matter what the DNA says, I love that little girl more than my own life. She is my daughter. But if I am going to stay in this house, Elena, I need the absolute, unfiltered truth. Right now. What happened at the hospital? Elena closed her eyes, a heavy, agonizing sob escaping her throat. She had carried the crushing weight of this horrific secret completely alone for 20 years, and the moment of catastrophic release had finally arrived. She slowly opened the small metal lockbox. Inside was a single, heavily yellowed medical document, dated nearly 19 years ago. Elena pulled the document out and placed it on the coffee table with trembling hands. You thought I cheated on you, Elena whispered, her voice cracking violently. You thought the DNA test proved I was unfaithful. But Marcus, look at the test you took. Really look at it. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He had the results memorized. It said I shared 0% of my DNA with Maya. It said I wasn't the father. It did, Elena sobbed, looking up at him with eyes entirely ruined by 2 decades of silent agony. But what you didn't check was whether or not she matched me. The air in the living room instantly froze. Marcus stared at his weeping wife, his brain desperately trying to process the absolute impossibility of her words. He slowly reached down and picked up the yellowed medical document from the coffee table. It was a certified genetic test from a private lab, dated exactly 11 months after Maya was born. Marcus read the bold black text on the page. His heart violently slammed against his ribs. Maternity match failed. No biological relationship detected. The paper slipped from Marcus's hands, fluttering to the floor. His legs completely gave out, forcing him to collapse onto the edge of the sofa. She isn't yours either. Marcus gasped, a cold, suffocating shock paralyzing his entire body. Elena, how is that even possible? You gave birth to her. I was in the room. I gave birth to a baby girl on the night of the massive city blackout. Elena cried hysterically, the terrifying memories flooding back. The hospital was in absolute chaotic darkness. The backup generators failed in the maternity ward for almost an hour. The nurses were scrambling, rushing babies to the emergency NICU downstairs to keep them warm. In the absolute chaos, in the pitch black, a terrified, overworked nurse put the wrong wristband on the wrong baby. Marcus physically stopped breathing. The reality of the catastrophic, life-altering mistake violently crushed his mind. When Maya was 11 months old, she got sick, Elena continued, tears streaming down her pale face. The pediatrician ran some routine blood work. When the results came back, I saw her blood type. It was chemically, biologically impossible for her to be ours. So, while you were on a business trip, I took a secret DNA test. When it came back, my entire world completely shattered. Why didn't you tell me? Marcus yelled, a desperate, agonizing panic rising in his chest. Elena, we went home with a stranger's baby. Our biological daughter is out there somewhere. We should have sued the hospital. We should have searched for her. Because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. Elena wailed, clutching her chest as she finally released 20 years of suffocating terror. If I exposed the hospital's mistake, the state would have immediately intervened. They would have taken Maya away from us and handed her over to a family of total strangers. And they would have handed us a 1-year-old toddler who didn't know us, didn't want us, and was crying for the only parents she had ever known. The absolute, devastating horror of the situation violently slammed into Marcus. I watched you with her, Marcus, Elena whispered, crawling closer to his knees, her voice breaking with profound, unconditional love. I watched you hold her when she cried. I watched you look at her like she was the absolute center of your entire universe. You were so incredibly happy. If I told you the truth, that happiness would have been violently ripped away. We would have spent the rest of our lives trapped in a horrific legal nightmare, mourning a child we never knew, and traumatizing the child we had already fallen completely in love with. Elena reached up, her trembling, tear-soaked hands gently gripping Marcus's hands. I never cheated on you, Marcus, Elena sobbed, her eyes piercing directly into his soul. I made a choice. I chose to carry the terrifying guilt. I chose to live in absolute fear every single day, praying you would never find out. I absorbed all of the pain, the secrecy, and the terror entirely on my own, so that you could just be a father, so that you could love her purely, without the shadow of biology ruining it. I lied to you for 20 years because I was protecting our family. Marcus sat completely frozen on the edge of the sofa. The massive, toxic wall of anger and betrayal he had built over the last 3 days instantly shattered into a million pieces, replaced by an overwhelming, profound awe at the unimaginable sacrifice his wife had silently endured. Elena hadn't betrayed him. She had saved him. She had sacrificed her own peace of mind, bearing a horrific psychological burden for 2 decades, just to ensure her husband and daughter could live in a perfect, untainted fairy tale. But as Marcus pulled his weeping wife into his arms, finally understanding the true, devastating meaning of unconditional love, a massive, unshakable question still loomed terrifyingly over their heads. Maya had mailed her own DNA kit, and her results were arriving any day now. The next 2 weeks in the house were agonizing. Marcus and Elena lived in a state of suspended, terrifying anticipation. They had finally reconciled. Their bond stronger and more profoundly honest than it had ever been. But the shadow of Maya's impending DNA results hung over them like an executioner's blade. They decided together that they couldn't tell Maya over the phone. They needed to wait until she came home for the holidays, so they could hold her, comfort her, and assure her that absolutely nothing had changed. But secrets, especially digital ones, rarely adhere to a schedule. It was a Tuesday evening when the front door violently burst open. Marcus and Elena rushed into the hallway to find Maya standing in the entryway, completely ignoring her heavy canvas backpack as it slipped off her shoulder and crashed onto the hardwood floor. She was clutching her cell phone with trembling hands. Her face was pale, streaked with fresh tears, and her eyes darted between her mother and father in sheer, unfiltered panic. "Maya?" Marcus asked, his heart dropping into his stomach. "Sweetie, what are you doing home? It's Tuesday." Maya didn't answer his question. She held up her phone, the bright screen illuminating her terrified face. "I got the email notification in the middle of my biology lab," Maya choked out, her voice trembling violently. "I opened it to see if I was related to a princess, like I joked about. But it said I have 0 shared DNA with Dad." Maya's tear-filled eyes locked onto Elena. The exact same horrific conclusion that had destroyed Marcus 2 weeks ago was now rapidly poisoning Maya's mind. "Mom," Maya whispered, her voice breaking with deep betrayal. Did you lie to him? Who is my real dad?" Elena's breath hitched, the agonizing guilt instantly flooding back into her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, to absorb the horrific accusation just like she had for 20 years, but before she could utter a single syllable, Marcus stepped forward. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't pull away. He walked directly up to his wife, firmly wrapped his arm around her waist, and pulled her tightly against his side, presenting an absolute, unbreakable united front. "Your mother is the most fiercely loyal, deeply loving woman on the face of this earth, Maya," Marcus said, his voice completely steady, radiating immense, protective power. "She never lied to me. She never betrayed me. And she is absolutely, without a doubt, your mother." Maya stared at them, completely bewildered. "But the test only measures biology," Marcus interrupted gently, reaching his free hand out to gently wipe a tear from Maya's cheek. "It doesn't measure who stayed up with you for 3 days straight when you had the flu. It doesn't measure who packed your lunches, kissed your scraped knees, or cheered the loudest at your graduation. A hospital made a catastrophic mistake 20 years ago in a blackout. Maya, we don't share the same blood." Maya gasped, the crushing reality of the hospital switch violently hitting her all at once. Her knees wobbled, and Marcus instantly caught her, guiding her to sit on the edge of the hallway stairs alongside Elena. "You knew?" Maya sobbed, looking at Elena. "You knew I wasn't yours. And you kept me anyway?" "I didn't keep you anyway, Maya." Elena wept, gently cupping her daughter's face. "I kept you because you were mine. From the absolute second they placed you in my arms, my soul recognized yours. When I found out the truth, I didn't care what the blood type said. If I had spoken up, they would have taken you away from us. And I would have gladly burned the entire world down before I let anyone take my little girl." Maya buried her face in her hands, entirely overwhelmed by the massive, life-altering revelation. But if I'm not your biological daughter, who am I?" Marcus kneeled on the hardwood floor in front of her. He gently took Maya's trembling hands in his own, making sure she was looking directly into his eyes. "Listen to me, Maya," Marcus said softly, his voice thick with profound, unshakable emotion. "Fatherhood isn't in the blood. It's in the breakfast made, the scraped knees kissed, and the years stayed. Biology didn't teach you how to build model airplanes. Biology didn't give you our terrible sense of humor. We chose you, Maya. Every single day for 20 years, we actively chose to be your parents. And if we could go back in time to that dark hospital room, knowing everything we know right now, We would pick you again. Every single time. Maya looked at the man who had protected her for 2 decades, and the woman who had silently carried a terrifying burden to keep their family whole. She realized in that exact moment that Dina was nothing more than a biological coincidence. Love was an action. Maya practically threw herself off the step, fiercely wrapping her arms around both of her parents in a desperate, deeply emotional embrace. "You're my dad," Maya sobbed into Marcus's shoulder. "You're my mom. That's all that matters." 1 year later, the warm, golden afternoon sun streamed through the massive windows of Maya's university auditorium. The room was packed with cheering families as the graduating class walked across the stage. Marcus and Elena sat in the front row, holding hands tightly. Elena looked radiant, the heavy, suffocating weight she had carried for 20 years entirely gone from her shoulders. Marcus held his digital camera up, beaming with absolute, unfiltered pride. "Maya Vance," the dean announced into the microphone. Maya walked across the stage in her cap and gown, accepting her diploma with a massive, brilliant smile. As she turned toward the audience, she locked eyes with Marcus and Elena. She didn't wave at her biological parents. She waved at the 2 people who had sacrificed their own peace, fiercely protected her, and loved her unconditionally when they didn't have to. Maya tapped her heart, pointing directly at them. Marcus smiled, pulling Elena close as he watched his absolute perfect daughter walk off the stage. They had survived the ultimate test of their family's foundation, proving once and for all that while blood might write the first page of a story, love is what fills the entire book. The lesson: when we become obsessed with the idea that family is strictly defined by blood and genetics, we completely diminish the profound, beautiful power of choice. True parenthood is not a biological default. It is a daily, relentless commitment. It is found in the sacrifices made in the dark, the unwavering support through the chaos, and the fierce, protective love that defies all logic. When you judge a family strictly by their Dina, you miss the absolute most important truth. The strongest bonds in this world are built by the people who stay. Every moment has a meaning, but not every truth is easy to face. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe. Comment "love over blood" below if you believe that true family is built on loyalty, not genetics. This is Moments and Meanings by Anne, and I'll see you in the next story.